Masechet Avoda Zara Daf Samech Zayin. Zeh Kelal Kol Shebeha'na'ato benoten tam v'chule. The Mishnah taught the general rule that if there's a mixture and the non-kosher part of it gives taste and it's a good taste, then the entire mixture is prohibited. However, if the non-kosher part that falls into the kosher part either is not enough to give taste or it gives bad taste, then the mixture is permitted. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Hachi Hilcheta. Shmuel says that the halacha follows this rule. Remember, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, we're going to see a bunch of Amoraim that agree with this rule, and then we're going to discuss who might disagree with it. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. But first, another law in the name of Shmuel. Lo shanu ela shenafal letoch girisin rotchin. Aval nafal letoch girisin sonenin vehirtichan. Nasa kemish ishbiach ulbasof pagam ve'asur. Shmuel says that this ruling applies only, let's say, if vinegar fell into split beans that are hot. If vinegar falls into hot beans, it makes it taste bad. But if vinegar goes into cold beans, then it makes them taste better. So here you have a case where it could make it taste good or bad, just depends on the temperature. So if it falls in while the beans are hot, and at that moment it makes it taste worse, then the mixture is permitted. However, if it fell into cold beans, and at that moment when it fell in, it's making it taste better because it's cold, even though later on, if you heat it up, then it will make it taste bad. That is considered a case where, at first, when it falls in, it made it taste better. Only later on, it made it taste worse. And in that case, we don't consider important what happens later on, but rather only what happened at the beginning. And therefore, it's prohibited. So we judge, when we want to judge whether it gives good taste or bad taste, we judge what is it giving good taste right then at the time of the falling in, when it goes into the mixture, and it doesn't matter if that changes later on. V'chen ki ata ravin amar Rabba bar bar Chana amar Rabbi Yochanan lo shanu ela shenafal letoch girisin rotchin aval nafal letoch girisin sonenin v'irtichan nasa kemish ishbiach ulbasof pagam. And when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said also in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the same ruling of Shemuel, that we only consider it to be permitted if, when at the time that it falls in, it gives a bad taste because it's hot at that point. But if it falls in while it's cold and it gives a good taste, and only then later on you heat it up and it became a bad taste, then that is considered shishbiach. It doesn't matter that lebasof pagam, and so therefore that would be prohibited. וכן אתה כי אתה רב דימי וכו'. וכך היו עושים בערבי שבתות בסיפורי וקוראים אותם שחליים. And also Rav Dimi, when he came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he also reported the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the same law. And this type of dish, that the vinegar tastes good when it's cold, they used to make this dish on Erev Shabbat in Sipori, and they would call it a cress dish because it had a taste of cress, and so this is a real dish that they would use with the split beans, and they put vinegar in it, but it was good while it's cold, but you wouldn't heat it up because then it would turn bad. What we see from all of these rulings is that everybody here, right, Ravin and Rabbi Yochanan, Avdimi and Rabbi Yochanan, and Shemuel, they all agree with the basic premise that if something falls in that gives it a bad taste, at the time that it's falling in it's a bad taste, then it's permitted. So the basic ruling, so far everybody agrees with, that noten tam lifgam is mutar. Amar Resh Lakish. Noten tam lifgam she'amru. Lo she'amru kedara zo chasera melach, yetera melach, chasera tavlin, yetera tavlin, ela kol she'en chasera kilum, ve'ena ne'echelet mipnei zeh. We're going to see a ruling by Resh Lakish. We're going to see another version of this ruling. The first one is going to be more stringent, the second one lenient. And the question is, what if vinegar or something that goes into something that makes it taste bad, but it's not the only factor that's making it taste bad? Let's say it's also oversalted, undersalted, and so on. So we look at both contributing factors or not. So in the first version, he says, when we say noten tam nifgam, that we look at the prohibited thing. Let's say it's vinegar that's prohibited and it's falling into something kosher. We don't look at it by someone saying, "Oh, this dish is lacking salt, or it has too much salt. It's lacking spices, it has too much spices, and therefore that's the reason why it tastes bad." That together with the vinegar that fell in. No, we don't consider the other items. Rather, we have to look at it. Let's say it was missing nothing else at all. That the salt was perfect, the other ingredients, the spices were perfect, and the only reason it tastes bad and is unedible, it's so bad that you can't eat it, is because of this prohibited thing, the vinegar, let's say, that fell into it. So it has to be that the vinegar alone, even if everything else was perfect, the vinegar alone would make it unedible. Only then do we apply the leniency of noten ta'am nifgam. So this is a high bar, it's a stringency. Vika de amre, but there's another version. Amar shakish noten ta'am nifgam shamru en omrim kedarazo chasera melach chasera tablin ela hashta miha ha pagma. So according to this, we do not say, "Oh, well, it was bad anyway because it was lacking salt, it had too much salt, it was lacking spices, it has too much spices." Rather, we look at it as is now. Right now, because it's true, there was also too much salt. But the salt by itself, the too much salt, it still would have been edible. But the too much salt combined with this prohibited ingredient that just fell into it, right now, it's bad and unedible. So we can consider both factors together, and even if the prohibited substance by itself wouldn't have been so bad, still would have been edible with that, but in combination of it already being over salted and this prohibited vinegar falling in, the combination makes it unedible. That also is considered noten ta'am nifgam, and it would be permitted, so that's a lenient version. Amar Rabbi Abu Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kol she'ta'amo u'mamasho asur lokin alav vezeu kezait b'chda achilat peras. And now Rabbi Yochanan gives a ruling. Let's say a prohibited stew falls into something else, and in that there was still not only taste but also some pieces of non-kosher meat falls into some other big pot of permitted items. So you have ta'amo and mamasho. It's not like if it's just a liquid that it gets all mixed in, but you actually have pieces there that are not going to be nullified because the pieces are there. So this is prohibited, and the mixture is prohibited, and one would get lashes, but you only get lashes if you eat enough of it. You only get lashes if you have a measurement, a shi'ur. Now the shi'ur for getting lashes for a prohibited substance is kizait. If you eat less than a kizait of whatever, pig, anything, you're not going to get lashes. And it has to be within a certain time period. If you eat a little bit of pig in the morning, a little bit of pig in the afternoon, so even if it adds up to a kazait, it's over a long time, so you wouldn't get lashes. Rather, in order to get lashes, you have to eat a kazait within the time it would take to eat a half of a loaf of bread. Half a loaf of bread is the standard amount that people would eat within one meal, because we learned that a whole loaf of bread is good for 2 meals. So figure how much do people eat during one meal? That's half of a loaf. How long would it normally take to eat half a loaf? So if you eat a kizait, which is less than half a loaf, in that amount of time, then that would be liable. If you eat a kizait, but if it's over a longer period of time, then one is not liable. So in this case, one has to eat a kizait of the prohibited substance within this amount of time, which means, let's say, some pieces of non-kosher hot dog fell into a kosher stew that you're making, and the pieces are there, so it's not going to be batel. Now, you have to eat enough of the whole stew that during the amount of time it takes to eat a peras, which is a few minutes, let's say 10 minutes, you have to eat enough of the prohibited hot dog pieces that those pieces will all add up to a kazait. So that would be hard to do if there's only a little bit of hot dog pieces that fell into it that are prohibited, because it's not about eating a kazait of the whole stew. Most of the stew is kosher. It's 90% is kosher. So you'd have to eat quite a lot of stew to get those a kazait of those little pieces. But it depends on how much you're eating. It depends on how much fell into it, and what the ratio is. So one can still get malkut, but only if it's that amount. And that's talking about when pieces of the prohibited item are still there. Ta'amo velo mamasho. But what if it's only flavor, but no substance? Everything, the prohibited thing got totally absorbed, totally mashed and mixed in, so that there's no actuality, only taste. Asur ve'endokin alav. Then, even if someone would eat it, it's prohibited to eat because it has taste of the non-kosher. So it's prohibited to eat, but if one did eat it, one would not get lashes because you don't have the substance of the prohibited item there. Vimri ba tam lifgam mutad. And if the prohibited food amplified the taste for bad, then it's permitted. So that was a Rabbi Yochanan statement. We ask about this language of riba. Velema im natan tam lifgam mutar. Why did Rabbi Yochanan choose the word riba? Why not the standard formulation? If the forbidden substance gives negative flavor, then it's permitted. Why do you say why instead of natan? Why do you say riba? Hakamash malan da'afal gav de'ika mile achara naita defagma behadeh behilcheta kedishna batra deresh lakish. He wanted to teach, using the word riba, that even if there is another ingredient in the food that's also making it taste bad, like there's too much salt in it, the too much salt by itself, it wouldn't be so bad. The prohibited vinegar that fell in by itself wouldn't be so bad. But the combination of the two, they interact with each other to make it really bad and totally unedible. Still, that is permitted. And so by saying the word riba, if it increases, it was already kind of bad, but now this is increasing the bad taste, and it's really bad, then it's permitted. So that is the second language that we heard from Resh Lakish. So he's teaching at the halacha is like the second version of Resh Lakish, that even if the new ingredient, the prohibited ingredient, is only one of other contributing factors making it taste bad, still we call it noten tam lifgam, and it's permitted. Amar Rav Kahana, medivrei kulam nilmad noten tam lifgam mutar. Rav Kahana said, we can learn from the statements of all the statements that we said today, from Shemuel, from Rabbi Yochanan, from Resh Lakish, that they all agree with the basic principle that if something gives bad taste, then it's permitted. There were slight differences, how do you measure it, what do you consider it, but they all agree with the basic principle. If it gives bad taste at the beginning, but then it gets better later on, or vice versa. So there was some, if this is the only contributing factor or other contributing factors, but basically everybody agrees that it is permitted if it gives bad taste. Amar le Abaye, bishlama mikulhu lehaye, ela deresh lakish ameru ka'amar, vele la sebira le. Abaye says, yeah, I agree with all of them. Indeed, very well. They all agree with the principle, except for Resh Lakish, because Resh Lakish only says ameru, the sages said. But by quoting them, they said, sounds like he himself does not agree with the principle. So you're trying to tell me that there is an opinion out there that says if it imparts bad taste, still it's prohibited? And we answer yes, there is such an opinion. אחד נותן טעם לפגם ואחד נותן טעם לשבח אסור. דברי רבי מאיר. רבי שמעון אומר, לשבח אסור, לפגם מותר. It's not only Resh Lakish, but in fact there's a Tanaitic opinion and some machloket between two Tanaim in the Baraita, where according to Rabbi Meir, whether the prohibited ingredient adds flavor to its detriment or makes it taste better, still it's prohibited. So there you go. Rabbi Meir says, noten tam lifgam is asur. And Rabbi Shimon, he's the one that says, if it gives good taste, then it's prohibited. But if the prohibited ingredient gives bad taste, then it's permitted. So Rabbi Shimon is what everybody's following halacha, like is a majority. But there is the opinion of Rabbi Meir that says, noten tam lifgam is still asur. My tamad Rabbi Meir. What is Rabbi Meir's source? Gamar mi ge'ole goyim. Ge'ole goyim lav noten tam lifgam hu, ve'asar chamana, hachiname la shena. We learn it from the vessels of non-Jews. These are the vessels that Bnei Israel won in their war with Midian, and they had to go through a purging process, through fire, through water, to take out the taste that was in it from the non-kosher food that the Midianites had used them for. That's a pasuk that we learn all the laws of koshering vessels from. Now, those vessels wasn't the taste in there a bad taste, because we know that after 24 hours, any taste, even if they cook some delicious thing in it the day before, after 24 hours, that taste is going to turn sour, and it's going to be a bad taste. And so even though that was a bad taste, we didn't say, oh, just leave it for a day, and then it's permitted. Rather, Torah says you have to go and kosher it. And Torah says that the vessels are prohibited until you get that taste out. So here also, it makes no difference whether it's a good taste or a bad taste. One has to get the taste out, and even bad taste is prohibited. V'idach, Rabbi Shimon, that sounds like a good proof. How will Rabbi Shimon answer that? כדרב הונא ברד רב חייא, דאמר רב הונא ברד רב חייא, לא אסרה תורה אלא כדרב בת יומא, דלה לפגם הוא. He'll answer as Rav Huna, the son of Rav Chiya, said regarding those Pesukim, that when the Torah says, take those vessels from the Midianites and you have to kosher them and burn them in fire and so on, that was only if it was used within that day. Maybe that very morning of the war, say the non-Jews cooked something in it, and then they won the war, they got this, and the Bnei Israel, they want to use it later that night to cook. If you want to do that, then you have to kosher the vessel. If it's already the next day, 2 days later, then you would not have to kosher the vessel, because noten tam lifkam is mutar. And the only reason that the Torah said is asur, it's only regarding the using of vessels on that day. Ve'idach kedera bat yoma name I efsha de la pagma purta. And what will Rabbi Meir respond to Rabbi Shimon, who said that the Torah could be telling you that you have to kosher them if you want to use them on that very day? Rabbi Meir would say that even within 24 hours on that very day, it's impossible that it won't detract some flavor from the dish. Even within 24 hours, still, it's not going to be so good. So even that is a little bit of noten tam lifkam. So even for that very day that you have to kosher it, proves that noten tam lifkam is prohibited. And now we ask the other way, Rabbi Shimon, my tama, what's Rabbi Shimon's source to say that if it has a bad taste, then it's permitted? The Tanya, lo tochelu kol nebela lager asher bish'arecha, kol ha're'uya lager kiruya nebela, she'en re'uya lager ena kiruya nebela. Pasuk in Devarim says that if you have a nebela, an animal that did not get proper slaughter, then you're not allowed to eat it, but you can give it to the non-Jew, the Ger Toshab, who lives among you. He's allowed to eat it. What you see here is that it is something that's edible. So we learn something that is edible, such that a Ger Toshab can eat it. That is called nebela, and it's prohibited for a Jew. But let's say it's not edible, and even the Ger Toshab could not eat it because it's rotten, it's spoiled, bad taste. Then that's not called a nebela, and therefore there's no prohibition of nebela on it. So therefore, it would be permitted, a Jew could eat it. Now, you might not want to eat it because it's disgusting, it's rancid, it tastes bad, but technically, there's no law that it's not kosher. And therefore, that would be the same as a little bit of bad taste that falls into something that's kosher. Okay, so it's a little bit of bad taste, it's making it taste worse. Well, that little bit of bad taste is permitted, because you see here that it's not called a nebela unless it's edible. If it's a bad tasting thing, then it's not called a nebela. There's no prohibition about it. That's Rabbi Shimon's proof. Rabbi Meir. Now, what will Rabbi Meir answer to this inference that we made? Rabbi Meir thinks that even if it's a bad taste, then it's still considered not kosher. So how come, what do you do with this inference? That sounds like only if a non-Jew can eat it, then it's considered nebela. But if it's not edible, it's not considered nebela, and it's kosher. So he answers, this inference will exclude something that, and say is kosher, something that was rancid from the outset. Even from before the animal was killed, it was already had a disease, it was already tasted bad. And so then you kill it in some way, and it's not kosher slaughter. And so it's already, from the moment that it's killed, it's already tasting bad. That is called something that's not a nevela, is permitted because it's already bad from the outset. But if at the time that the animal is killed, it tastes good, that you can give to a ger. That's called a nevela, and it continues to be called a nevela and prohibited even after it becomes rancid afterwards. So Rabbi Meir says, as long as it originally tasted good, and then it became bad, it still is prohibited. And so that's why any taste inside the wall vessels, or the taste, a little bit of something bad tasting falls in to a pot, then that is prohibited still. But in fact, you're right. This inference is only referring to something that never tasted good. That is not called nevela. That would be kosher. Rabbi Shimon, how would Rabbi Shimon respond to that? He would say that if it was bad tasting to begin with, even from before it was killed, then you don't need a pasuk. That's obvious. That's like dust of the earth. What is this? It never was even food. It never was considered anything to even become food that could be prohibited. That's just dust of the earth, and so we don't need a pasuk to tell us that. That's obvious. Therefore, the pasuk must be coming to teach us something else. So according to Rabbi Shimon, is teaching us that even if it tasted good at the beginning and you give it to a ger, only while the ger can eat it, only while it's edible, it's called nevela. But once it's not edible, once it gives a bad taste, then it's not called nevela, and it's permitted in a mixture. And Rabbi Meir disagrees. Baruch Adonai D'Olam. Amen ve'amen.